You know, the first time you hear a 9/11 joke, you always think to yourself, man, am I a bad person for laughing? And then the second one hits. Hey there, kiddos, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Uncle Frank, hoping that you are having a great day. And in today's video, I'm going to be sitting back, relaxing with all of you, and tackling a viewer question. The trade box asks, can you provide a breakdown on how you sort bulk for Magic the Gathering by sets, rarity, color, and year? Do you write on the boxes? Do you track your inventory? What a time to be alive, selling, trading, and buying cardboard. Yeah, this is definitely one of the eras of human history. Just think about it. You know, our great-grandfathers were killing each other at war, and here we are today, chilling and playing with cardboard. Fun stuff. Yeah, so when, most of the time at least, most of the time when you get bulk from any card game, it's completely disorganized. And I have the same process for Magic the Gathering that I do for pretty much all other card games. So when I get a big old box of bulk, and I probably should have brought over one of the boxes to illustrate, but when I get a box of bulk, no matter how much bulk is in that box, it's usually unsorted. So I have a multi-step process before I add that bulk, those cards, to my inventory. The first thing I do is go through the entire box and organize all the cards by their game. So Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, Flesh and Blood, that all get separated into their own piles. Then I go back to those piles that I just made and I organize them all by their sets. Everything goes into its own individual set. Finally, right before I prepare to add it to the inventory, I go through the entire set and I don't organize it by color, rarity, or anything like that. The only thing I organize my cards for before they go into the inventory is alphabetically. A to Z, front to back. And I do that because on TCG Player, at the very least, the top to bottom list on card entry per set is done alphabetically. A few things to note. As I'm going through this process from organizing it by game, set, and alphabetically, the entire time I'm flipping the cards around, checking for scuffs, scratches, dents, etc. And I'm always pulling out any card that couldn't be at least close to or is near mint. I don't like to sell non-near mint cards on TCG Player unless they are very specific kinds of cards, like vintage Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon, for instance. I have found that vintage Pokemon, vintage Yu-Gi-Oh!, especially if they're the right cards, those do sell fairly well. Vintage Magic damaged cards don't tend to sell well. And in my personal opinion, if it is not near mint, then it's either heavily played or damaged. I don't really care too much for the light or moderate play categories on TCG Player because it's such a broad strokes between the two of them. So that's the first thing. The first thing is I always just go through every single step of the process. I'm double checking for damage to the cards. I can pull those aside and throw them in a bulk box to either sell myself or donate. Depends on how I'm feeling when the box is filled. Second off, after the cards are added to TCG Player, they all go on this wall. And it's kind of hard to show it on the one camera, but it's all this. All these boxes behind me is full to the brim with my TCG Player inventory. And once it's in TCG Player, I don't really track it. I do mark the sets. You know, this is, this box right here is Time Spiral Remastered. I do label it. I do keep track of where it is in the collection. And when I started out, I was trying to keep things roughly organized in a set release order. So over here in the corner of the garage that is mostly Magic the Gathering, I have it started off with Fallen Empires, the Weatherlight block, the Urza block, etc. Then it loops around to things like Onslaught, Tempest, etc. And I try to keep it in roughly release order, but as we got closer and closer to modern day and more stuff got added to the inventory, it became harder and harder to keep things in release order. I would still like to go back at some point and maybe reorganize it all, but right now it's in release order up until Modern Horizons 2, and then it just kind of goes into whatever empty spot I have. For the Force of Will stuff, I have over here on this wall, in this area, Those are not organized in any particular way other than alphabetically. So the ADK is up there, and then down here we have things like Vingolf and Winds of the Ominous Moon, I think is WLM. I haven't memorized all the Force of Will set names. And then that's the last of the ones that are organized in any way. Early on, I had a lot of Force of Will cards and a lot of Magic cards, so those made up the bulk of my inventory. Now that I've branched out into other things, including Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, Flesh and Blood a lot, those aren't organized in any particular way. If you can see where I'm standing right here, this is just random Yu-Gi-Oh! Stuff. There's no organization to which sets go in which order. As long as the cards in the set are alphabetized, that's all I care about. So, as you can see, we have Infinite Forbidden there, Supreme Darkness there, some Speed Duel stuff there, Darkwing Blast. It's all mixed together. That's not organized in any way. And then over here on this corner, we've got a bunch of Flesh and Blood stuff that is completely disorganized. Welcome to Earth at the top. Monarch over here, more Monarch over there. Not great organized. But yeah, do I track my inventory? To answer that other question, before I get into more rambling about how disorganized I am. I don't keep track of my inventory in I don't have a spreadsheet of all the cards I'm supposed to have, and I don't go through the entire thing checking for accuracy. But I do update my inventory frequently when I get new cards, and when I get new cards, I don't just add the individual cards to the listings and then throw them in the box. Instead, what I always do is, especially if I have more than 100 cards I'm adding, let's say that I'm adding so if I was adding 100 cards to Phantom Nightmare, what I would do is I would take those 100 cards and the cards that are already in this box for Phantom Nightmare, and I would just double check their numbers as I'm adding them to the inventory, just to make sure that things are accurate. And I do this because, one, I make mistakes all the time. My number one mistake that I find when I'm doing TCG orders these days is, especially when I'm adding a lot of cards to the inventory, I miscount all the time. Usually it's just by 1 or 2 cards, but sometimes I'll put a number on the TCG player where I have 3 cards and I accidentally input 30. That's not good. That's very much not good. So double checking your work when you go back and revise the set, it's all just common sense insofar as I'm concerned. The other reason is that TCG player sometimes makes mistakes, and I will input cards that I know for a fact I have put in, and then TCG player will have it not in the inventory, which annoys me. It happens more often than not with Flesh and Blood. I will put Majestics in for Flesh and Blood all the time because I keep getting them in. And then just a few days later, I'll go back to check that particular set and see that all the Majestics I put in are gone, and they weren't ordered, they weren't bought. TCG player just did not save the update, and that happens a few times. It happens more often when you're adding single cards to a set rather than a huge bulk pile. But the fact that it happens at all does annoy me a slight bit, but I found that if you just keep up with it and double check, you're fine usually. Yeah, that's really it. It's not a particularly complex process. It's basically just breaking things down into their set and then making sure that that set is as organized as it possibly could be. Which makes for a very relaxing afternoon, especially if you're just trying to enjoy your time and you got something nice to listen to in the background. I put on, for instance, right now I'm listening to Settled. He's got this 11-hour video about RuneScape that I've been watching, and I've just been organizing some bulk stuff. So, have something to occupy your time, enjoy yourself, and you'll find that just sorting bulk itself can be quite fun and quite rewarding. And yeah, there's really not a whole lot of extra effort that needs to go into it. So, I hope that answered your question. Thank you for the question. It gives me a whole video to talk about. So, I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. Let me know in the comments down below if you guys have questions you'd like me to answer for a future video. And as always, thank you so much. Have a great one.